Investor rejection, team building issues, months of not getting like that breakthrough scale, breakthrough growth. Why isn't the business growing? Why aren't partners agreeing to onboard? It took us, I think, again, 5 years to onboard today our largest partner, Estee Lauder. So imagine 5 years we didn't even have the partner, which is today a huge part of our business.
So folks, of course, I'm guessing all the Indian audience knows about Nykaa and Adwaita and some parts of her journey. But for the benefit of the founders from Southeast Asia, Adwaita, I'm going to just take a few minutes to introduce you and the business. So Nykaa is a large beauty destination play. It was founded in 2012 by Adwaita and her mother, Falguni. And over the years, they've also expanded into fashion. So they have two businesses, Nykaa Beauty and Nykaa Fashion. Nykaa last financial year, achieved close to $1 billion in revenue. And even at that scale, they are growing close to 25% year on year. And Nykaa is a listed company with close to $8 billion of market cap. So they've achieved a lot in a very short time span. And today we're going to spend some time with Adwaita, just learning a little about the journey and what made them so successful. Thank you, Adwaita, for joining us.
No, I think thank you for having me. I'm a big fan of what you guys are building with Surge.
Thank you. You know, looking back in 2012, beauty e-commerce was really not a thing. I think Nykaa was well ahead of its years. What gave you and your mother the conviction to start the business? And just talk a little about, that why did you decide to go online first, especially in a world where Sephora and Ulta, some of the large beauty retailers, had chosen to go offline first?
Yeah. So, I love telling the story of how Nykaa started because I think it's an example of how there is no cookie cutter model to picking your idea and getting, off the ground with entrepreneurship. It was back in 2012. My mom had been an investment banker for 25 years. I had just graduated undergrad from the US, and she was just like, I've now put my two kids through undergrad. I am ready to take my risk and build a company. And so this was at the age of 51. Between me and her, we didn't even have more than 2 lipsticks in the entire house. So let me just say that the business didn't come from a place of, being obsessed with the category. It came more, and the credit is fully my mom's. She was like an investment banker, just got research report after research report and read about all the consumer categories in the US and what were the pros and cons. And sort of, it became very clear to her that beauty was an incredibly attractive space. And there's so many elements of beauty: the high gross margin, it's very hero product led, very good retention. She just started to pick up on these qualities, and so kind of honed in that beauty was a good space, then started to study some of the iconic global companies like Ulta, Sephora, furthered that conviction, then started to look at the Indian tailwinds that was supporting it, whether it was the digitization, whether it was more Indian women having purchasing power. And then, of course, there was an element of also realizing that a lot of the big Indian players were not focused on beauty, right? They were focused on electronics, they were focused on books, they were focused on apparel. So it was a bit of an under-penetrated space. So that's how she started. And, I just graduated. I was working at Bain Consulting in New York. And when she said, I think I want to start this tech company, I was like, count me in. And I just moved back to India. And that's been what the last 13 years have been like. We didn't have any grand vision. We never thought we were going to have $1 billion in sales or be an $8 billion market company, not at all. We just said, India doesn't have a one-stop shop for beauty. It's such an obvious need. Let's start building. And to be honest, so much of what Nykaa is today was literally sketched out on a piece of paper in our bedroom 13 years ago. We're going to do beauty, we're going to start online, it's less capital requirement, we're then going to go offline because of course we have to do offline. India's still such an offline market. We're then going to enter fashion, we're going to build some brands along the way. So a lot of the business model was sketched out then, and I think it's just been then relentless execution since then.
No, awesome. You guys have built you're very humble, but you've built the #1 beauty retailing platform in India. And, you've served so many customers over the last years. But tell us, we believe trust is a very big part of your success and your journey. And Nykaa's done an incredible job just building trust and loyalty with its customers. Actually, not even customers, but also its brand partners, ecosystem players like influencers. How did you go about building trust in the early years? Maybe break it down for our founders. Like, what are some of the things you did which built very deep trust and loyalty for your customers? And fast forward, how has it helped you grow your business?
I think it was just a really inherent value in us as individuals and humans as well, that we never wanted to cheat or do wrong by absolutely anyone. So it's just in the DNA of the company and the founders. And I'm sure all of you have a similar sentiment, but it manifested for us in everything. Early days of 2012 in beauty, all the brands were available in the counterfeit market in India. But we never wanted to list it because we never wanted to, deceive our customers. I remember, a second example is, and a lot of you in, digital e-com will realize this, it's so easy on a banner to put flat 50% off. But I remember, my mom used to freak out when our teams would do that because she'd find one product in the assortment that was not 50% off. And she's like, how can you lie to the customer? Or, simple principles we always teach our teams. Something I really believe in is just like transparency with the customer. If you're adding a charge, if you're adding a cart charge, please do not try to trick them. So I think there were just simple principles. It never came from a place of, hey, wanting to be known for trust. But now when we do our customer work and research, all of them say we trust Nykaa. And I think it was all these micro decisions. So we always say trust is built in the trenches and in the micro decisions rather than any one or two big decisions.
No, so true. And you guys have sparked the D2C revolution in the beauty industry. And over the last 6-7 years, as a consequence, the categories got a lot crowded, both from a brand perspective and from a retailer perspective. But you guys have maintained the pole position. You defend your market share very well. In fact, if you take a closer look into Nykaa, AOVs continue to grow year on year. Retention only keeps getting better. I'd love you to talk a little about moats to our founders. Tell them a little about what do you believe are the true moats that you built in Nykaa, and how do you constantly innovate to defend the business as you keep getting bigger?
Yeah. I actually want to take that question in a slightly different way. I'll answer the moat question, but I first want to talk about how it's so important to pick the right category and the right space. And so when we think back over the last 12 to 13 years, I want to give you guys 4 or 5 examples of how our world has changed in the last 13 years, just in beauty in India. So let me start here. So of course, when we started in 2012, even 2 years into the business, 2014, 15, we only had 50,000 customers who had shopped on Nykaa. Today, we have 45 million customers. Back in 2012, the beauty consumption per capita was $4. Today, it is $17. It is set to be $30 by 2030. Talking about brands, again, in the first few years, we just had 500 beauty brands that were listed on the platform. Today, there are 4,500. When we started, there was 0 Indian D2C beauty brands that were built. Today, in our top 10, we have 3 amazing Indian D2C. And all of us, building in India should. That India is such an incredible, once-in-a-lifetime consumption market trajectory story that we are all experiencing. The way beauty has quintupled since we started and is set to, triple in the next 5 years. You just don't get that kind of growth in many other economies. And sometimes when I read these metrics, I honestly feel like if you just sit on your business and just defend it, it will grow because the market is really growing. And all of this is to say this is an amazing time to build brands in India. It's an amazing time to be consumer-focused in India. And if you just take that longer-term vision, the day-to-day blips of not getting that immediate growth just seems a lot more palatable. So yeah, I wanted to make that point before talking about moats, just to say that I think Nykaa's done a lot of things right, but the bestest thing we did was picking beauty in India. It's sometimes just the choice you make in terms of the space you play, and then not messing up and doing your job really well. But the moat itself might have just been a really fantastic category.
But talk a little more about what else do you believe today are the moats for Nykaa? Because you have lots of competitors attacking you from every side. There are lots of retailers, deep-pocketed players as well. Whether it's an Amazon, it's a Tira, it's a Purple. How do you still continue to keep growing even at this scale?
Yeah, I think there's no I want to say a crazy answer. It's just the things you would imagine. It's about having the best possible assortment. As a family, as some of our senior leaders, we're constantly on the road pitching to brands everywhere, cold calling. It's about the best assortment. It's about having your pulse on the beauty market, talking about the right trends, creating the right content. It's about convenience, constantly improving your delivery. Today, 90% of our orders are delivered within 2 days. That's been a big investment in our logistics arm to be able to deliver that. So it's everything. It's assortment, it's convenience, it's the customer experience. And of course, again, it's a bit of a virtuous cycle. Once you have 45 million customers who are shopping with you with very good retention, that also is just a general moat. So now Nykaa has 30% market share in beauty, and yeah, we've been able to defend that and not lose a single percent for several years.
And maybe something more topical, like given quick commerce is now the biggest disruption in retail, how do you believe that they will also take away some market share away from you guys? What are you doing about it?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to see the emergence of quick commerce and the pace at which it's emerged. We've been tracking it really closely. It has not chipped away our market share. I'm not totally sure why. Maybe the pie is just increasing really dramatically. But some of the philosophies and theories we have is just like India is now just going to get used to much faster delivery. So it's going to become table stakes. And every platform will have to learn to deliver much, much faster. And so it's not about being able to deliver in 15 minutes, but I think the expectation of same day, next day is going to be humongous, and that's what we're really preparing for. That being said, we've also launched a quick commerce arm called Nykaa Now, and it's being piloted in Bombay and Delhi. And again, it's doing well, but we don't see it as like a completely like major disruption to our model. We feel that our business is much more about beauty. We feel that quick commerce is a little bit more about personal care. We feel we're much more about discovery, inspiration, the tail shades, the tail experiences, and it's hard for quick commerce to displace that just by the nature of their business.
And Adwaita, also talk a little about content as a strategy, because you've been pretty much the pioneers of leading content, especially how effectively you've used YouTube. Just share some snippets, what you guys did, quite differently in the early years. Of course, lots of players have now copied and do similar stuff, but in the early years, how did you think about content as a strategy?
I think it just came from the insight that the reason people were not shopping for beauty in India was because they didn't understand how to use the category. They didn't know enough. It felt like a category which needed just a lot of education. And so back in 2013, we started with just the basic non-tech savvy stuff, from blogs to on-site content, insisting on the best attribute tree for our products and therefore having very strong search. We then obviously moved on to influencers, YouTube, video content. We have a large content division and department. But it all just came from the place that we feel that beauty is a category where you need to actually teach people so that they can consume it better. And I remember in the early days, a lot of investors used to ask us, like, you have such a large content team, what is the ROI on this? We don't measure ROI on content. We actually believe in a 360-degree approach to marketing. Everything moves the needle, from like PR to influencers to a newspaper ad to literally somehow getting your brand email to a large organization. Like everything sort of chips away, and we don't try to apply ROI on it because we feel it's all about like saliency building and awareness building, and content is a piece of that.
Got it. Maybe moving on to the topic of positioning. I would think that most platforms in India have positioned themselves sharply in the value segment because they believe the TAM there is the largest. And if you look across businesses in general, very few businesses have been able to straddle a value and a premium positioning. You have to be sharply focused on one of the two. I think Nykaa has done a pretty good job in actually positioning itself across value to premium and even luxury without really alienating the customer. You're able to sell a Dove soap, you're able to sell an Estee Lauder lipstick, and I think it's very rare to see a platform straddle so many price segments. Just talk a little about how did you go about doing that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we actually inherently believe that Indian women are shopping across price points. And if we study the carts, and we did this for one of our brand partners because they kept being like, we don't want to be next to these non-premium brands. And so we pulled out like 1,000 carts with their products, and we showed them that that same customer is buying XYZ brands that are considered mass. And I think a lot of the women and men in the room, you all relate, right? You will buy sometimes a 50 rupee kajal, but you will also pair it with a 800 rupee skincare product, and you will pair it with a 10,000 rupee fragrance, because that is actually how all of us as consumers behave. Even in fashion, you will buy a tank top that is cheaper and sunglasses that are branded and shoes that are branded. And so for us, it's never been so much about like, this is value, this is masstige, this is premium, but more just like, how does the customer shop? And the data has always shown us that there's super mixed carts. And like, let's just take a step back. Like, all our platforms are only talking to, the top 100 million customers in this country, and that too is a stretch. So that's just such a small part of the population. So I think if you try to be even more focused and narrow in that, for us as platforms where getting scale is so essential, it could not work out. Like, I think for us also getting enough scale as platforms is really essential to make the economics work, and for that you have to be broad enough.
Oh, that's fair. You know, one thing in Surge, we often talk about our crucible moments that test a founder's resilience. And often enough, every founder has gone through multiple crucible moments before they actually see success and scale. We'd love you to share one or two crucible moments that tested your resilience.
So I love talking about the hardships of entrepreneurship, because I feel that definitely as we were building Nykaa, there weren't enough stories about how hard it is. And I think, you as entrepreneurs, and a lot of you just read the glossy headlines of success when it finally happens. And probably you sitting here watching me talk about Nykaa at the scale it is today, you just like, that is the success. But honestly, like, it was such a difficult journey for the first 5 years. I felt like we had crucible, like, near-death moments, like, every day. It was so very hard, and I always love revisiting it and talking about it, because I just feel like we don't talk about it enough. Everything, I mean, we spoke to 100 investors, at least, who said no to us. We faced like infinite rejection from investors, everyone being like, is beauty even a big enough market? Who are you guys? You don't know technology. And when times are tough, like, scale didn't come. The early days are just slow, and at that scale, when the revenue is not coming and you're not being able to deliver that growth, it was really hard to retain a team. So that was another thing we really struggled with, just like constantly the team falling apart. And that's when I really developed this thought that culture is great when business is great. You kind of need your business. The culture of Nykaa fantastically improved when the business started doing well. When actually you're struggling and you're not able to show your team's growth, neither in terms of top line, nor in terms of their increment, nor in terms of any sort of, traction, it's really hard even to maintain and sort of keep that team together. And I have so many memories of that. And I think that used to weigh me down personally, because I'm a very people-led leader and builder and so forth. So I would say like investor rejection, team building issues, months of not getting like that breakthrough scale, breakthrough growth. Why isn't the business growing? Why aren't partners agreeing to onboard? It took us, I think, again, 5 years to onboard today our largest partner, Estee Lauder. So imagine 5 years, we didn't even have the partner, which is today a huge part of our business. In fashion, which I started more recently, but it's a startup within a startup, it's till today, like 5 years in, I'm still trying to win some of the best brands. So I think the early days are just so tough. And so I have like huge empathy for early stage founders. And I know I also struggled with the lows. Like my mom and I, obviously, she's the main deal. I consider myself her sidekick, but we're also very, very different temperamentally. Like, she's very strong, she's very resilient. I also think it has a lot to do with, her age. I was just 22 when I joined the business. I used to get really bogged down by the lows, and the growth slowing and all these issues, right? She was so resilient. I learned a lot from her, but not all to say that I think early stage founders need a lot of support to get through it. They need partners who understand, they need friends, they need a network, they need these kind of communities. But most of all, I think they need to hear stories like what I'm saying, which is that literally for 5 years, I thought Nykaa was like not going to work at all. And I was convinced, I used to write in my journal, like, I don't want to do this. And now when it's like a huge success, I'm like, I want to do this. But I'm just taking a step back. I'm saying it's really hard to keep doing and going when actually things are not like fully picking up. But if retrospect, like, that is what makes you guys so special. You have to keep going because you never know when that breakthrough will come.
So when and what was that aha moment
Yeah.
which made you feel it's really working?
Yeah, I think I often get that asked that question, and again, I feel like there's no magic bullet. It was just sort of by 2017, which is around 5 years in, suddenly like things started working. Like the numbers started coming, the growth started coming, the brands started getting onboarded. And I don't think we changed anything. I think we just kind of stayed at it. We kept chipping away. We somehow broke through to one brand. Then the other brand looked at them and said, okay, if they've given them a chance, we'll also give them a chance. So there was no one thing, but it was just staying sort of dedicated, for 5 years at it, and it just started coming together.
And did you guys ever face a bias, especially your mother, because she was an investment banker, didn't come with industry experience in beauty. Also, she was a much older founder when she started up. Did you guys face any of these biases? Talk a little about that as well.
Yeah, huge. I think she still like commanded a lot of respect because again, she was a 25-year experienced investment banker. She was well connected in the corporate space. I can't imagine how tough it is for someone, for a lot of y'all, it's probably even way tougher. I think she still commanded respect, but despite her positioning, huge amount of judgment, bias. I would say the number one thing is a lot of investors didn't understand beauty as a space because they themselves were not the consumers. I think there were not enough women investors around. I've been in so many meetings with investors where they're like, but my sister only like buys like this, So like their understanding of the category was linked to like some arm's length sort of experience. There's a lot of bias, but I don't think it's gender related. I think it is tough to be an entrepreneur. It is tough to raise money. It is tough to get people to see your idea. It is tough to get people to see your qualities. I think you just have to be really thick-skinned.
How has life changed post an IPO? Does going public make you more risk averse?
I think going public does two things. The first is I think it makes you incredibly disciplined because you do need to report every quarter. And so I think the discipline of sort of being able to deliver on what you commit to in terms of top line and bottom line improvement, I think it's made us disciplined, rigorous, hardworking, committed to our numbers, and I think it has positively shaped our business. That is like the first thing. The second is that there is a lot more pressure because the markets have an opinion on what you're doing. And what the markets feel about your business changes every 2-3 years. When we IPO'd, it was all about growth. Then like 2 years later, it became all about profitability. Now it's somewhere in between. I think the learning has been that you cannot get influenced by what the markets and investors think about your business. Once you've taken your company public, it is even more an imperative that you are very clear on what you're building, and then you do not care what the markets or the investors are saying. Because their time frame, their horizon for investing is not the same as yours, and what they value is dependent on macro trends, and it changes all the time. But what you need to do needs to be long-term, consistent, and very clear, both for yourselves, for your team, and for the market in general. So really the two learnings are, I think it's really good. I think it makes you operate a lot more tightly, a lot better, but you need to be a much stronger entrepreneur and founder to be committed and not to get swayed by the opinions of many.
And talk a little about the type of talent Nykaa has attracted. There's a very different type of talent you would have worked with in the 0 to 1,000 journey, or maybe the pre-IPO journey. And now the talent that Nykaa attracts is quite different. So, tell our founders a little bit about, what's been the evolution of talent in the company.
Yeah, I feel like when I think about the last 13 years from total 0 startup stage to like mid-size to pre-IPO to IPO to post-IPO, I literally feel like we've gone through 4 or 5. The company has felt like 4 or 5 different companies each time. It's not the same company at all. Early days, we were working out of a tiny office in Vasan Udyog Bhavan, could not attract the highest paid talent at all. I was like begging my school friends, like, will you come join us and work with us? And, paying very little salary. So you attract like some type of talent, but they're motivated, but, the quality of execution may not be phenomenal. You then kind of move into a growth level. You kind of got your first round of funding. The growth is picking up. Then you get those like real growth hackers, the startup guys, the pros, like, there's a speed, there's a hustle, there's a rigor that comes with it. There's also a lot of expectation of compensation. There's expectation of equity. There's that whole dynamic. Then like pre-IPO, you try to bring in like some really solid professionals to professionalize like a lot of the support functions, finance, HR. These guys tend to be older. They brought in like a discipline, a stability, a steadiness. But again, like a very different culture to that like startup growth hacker culture that we just kind of translated from. Then you have an IPO, everyone gets their equity cashed out. You lose a lot of your people. We lost a huge number of our early, I remember as the IPO was approaching, I used to keep thinking that I think the IPO is going to happen and we're going to lose a lot of people. And like we lost a lot of people, and I understand, right? They'd given the company 10 years, then they had this amazing cash out event, made a lot more money they'd ever imagined, and now they want to pursue their dreams. But it left us in a phase where we'd lost a lot of our senior folks. Then it's about building a whole new bench, and now this time you can pay top salaries, you're getting phenomenal talent. The company is not that same startup type, so it's stabler, it's growing more steadily. We're attracting more people from the HULs, the L'Oreals, the McKinseys. Just it's totally different. And every phase, the culture has felt markedly different. I think what sort of holds it together is obviously my mom and I have been there constantly, so we are a constant, and we have certain qualities that kind of always remain consistent. We're both very risk-taking, very, very entrepreneurial, very high on ownership, very hardworking, and so some of those values stay, but a lot of the company changes.
So true. Actually, I mean, I've been watching Nykaa very closely over the last few years. Your first set of leaders were probably homegrown, right? Nobody really came from industry. And now, of course, like you said, you're attracting very senior leaders from the industry. So really well done on this transition. Maybe my next question is about, you're leading this business with your mother and your sibling, and each of you have very distinct leadership styles. How do you create room for each other, but yet drive very good decision making?
I think that's a good question. I think I do love founder-led companies because I feel, again, that founders bring a lot of long-termism, and then if you combine like sort of founder with family-led, again, there's just a lot of long-termism in there. We do not think about our next jobs at all. We do not think about ever leaving. We just think about doing this day in, day out for decades. And so I think there's a lot of stability that comes from that. So that's one real big positive. I think what we've ended up doing is we all have 3 very different mandates. We kind of split the business up into 3 parts, and everyone looks at different things. I think one thing we work on a lot, and it's a journey, is like learning how to communicate better with each other. In fact, we've just brought on a leadership team to help us work better together. Because I think sometimes with family and founders and co-founder types is like you just assume that the other person understands you. Like, if I was trying to convince my head of fashion, who's, like a professional in the company, like on a decision we need to take, I am like preparing for that meeting. But if I'm trying to convince my brother, my twin brother, on what we need to do, I'm just like, I told you, like, this is what we're going to do. I've done my work, right? So how do you bring that level of sort of professionalism and learn to communicate with each other with a lot more rigor is something that we continue to work on, but it's absolutely required.
And how do you manage conflicts?
So funnily enough, like me and my mom don't conflict at all. We don't have any conflict. I think, again, because I've worked with her from the beginning for the last 13 years. She's the only boss I've ever had. I feel I've just been an understudy in like her thinking. And so therefore, I feel like we're very similar in how we approach things. My brother, Anshit, he's obviously a fresh thinker. And he's not really like us. So I think there's more conflict between me and her and him. But I think it's healthy. Like I think both of us are very risk-taking and, like I said, entrepreneurial, very 0 to 1. He's much more sort of risk-averse, questions things, detail-oriented, cost-focused. So I think it's a good balance. But like I said, at the end of it, like in all, whether you're working with your siblings, spouses, co-founders, it's all about like communication and very effective communication, which sounds easy, but it's actually just so hard to do. You have to really make time for it, and you have to put an effort into driving good communication.
No, absolutely. So true.
Yeah.
Adwaita, we have a lot of founders building in AI in the audience, and I'm sure it's on their mind. How is Nykaa embracing AI, and how are you getting more future ready?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been incredible. I think we have 30 AI projects and pilots running across the company today. We have everything from like we've built our own in-house agent for our team members to talk to like crunch any data. So now anyone can talk to this, sort of agent and get sales data, trends, diagnosis of why a brand is degrowing, growing. We're thinking of opening this up to our brand partners. That's something we've built. Another thing, like we're now using a tool, like a bunch of tools to help us in like cataloging, image creation, catalog, banners. It's been mind-blowing to me. Like, big fancy shoots we used to have to do is now just, we use these tools and we get the banners just exactly how we need. We're using some, again, some third-party tools in our sort logic, in our search. So I think we're doing a combination of, taking from outside and in-house. I think right now the verdict is out on what the cost benefit will be, which I think is the thing top of mind for us, because a lot of these tools are very expensive. So is it actually cost accretive to be using them is the question we're still grappling with.
We have a few consumer founders who are building brand businesses in the audience, and I'm sure they're curious to know what's your advice to them in terms of how to go about building a consumer brand playbook. Like, are there any top 2, 3 design choices, first principles you would urge them to think about?
Yeah. Look, I think earlier also I said, like, I think it's really important to pick the right space. Where you feel like there are a lot of positive tailwinds. That's sort of design principle number 1. I think there's enough research out there to tell you that. Design principle number 2 is like I love high gross margin consumer product businesses. And I have at Nykaa tried to build both in beauty and in fashion products. And I think beauty tends to have much better gross margins than fashion. So it's a learning I've had that it's a total uphill battle to try to build brands with low gross margin, like because brands do need marketing budget. Within beauty, I think there are certain spaces that are even more attractive. So net the design principle being like pick a very gross margin attractive space. And I think a third principle, which is more general to like entrepreneurship in general, is like have at least a 5-year plan, 5-year vision. Do not sort of give up before 5 years because it just genuinely just takes time. And just keep chipping away at like the original vision, problem statement that you're trying to go after, but give it enough time. And I think the biggest mistake I see, entrepreneurs doing is they're just not giving their business enough time. They sort of get demotivated after 2 years, 3 years that it's not working. So somehow if you're able to fund yourself through those 5 years, it's really powerful.
Oh, awesome. So let's open it up. Questions?
So my question to you is, we have seen in the past 1.5, 2 years, you've also started opening stores. So just like to understand what has been thought, because you were doing extremely well online. So, and how do you see building it up?
Yeah, I think you mean beauty stores, right? Yeah, beauty stores. We actually started our beauty store journey back in, again, 2017, 18. We've had stores since then. We have 250 stores now all across the country. We really believe in offline. I think like if you look at the beauty market, it's $25 billion. Overall, 80% of that is actually on offline. And only 20% is online. So if you really want to dominate beauty in this country, you can't build it without offline. And for us, like we've been able to build a very profitable, nice offline model in business. Of course, it is more like working capital intensive. It is more capex required, but you can definitely make the economics work. But again, it's not about making the economics work. It's like if you want to dominate beauty in India, you have to have online, you have to have offline, you have to have your own brands. And so we're going after all of it.
So a quick question. We've been talking obviously a lot in our founder groups about premiumization and the fact that it's real, it's here. From a Nykaa perspective, maybe 2, 3 things that you've observed from like on this trend of premiumization, especially when it relates to tier 2, tier 3 and the cohorts there.
Yeah. It is 100% a real trend. Data points, 2015, Nykaa's average order value was 1,300 rupees. Today, Nykaa Beauty's average order value is 2,200 rupees. Nykaa Fashion's average order value is 4,500. So just imagine again, in less than like, in 6 years, the average order value has doubled. Average annual consumption value, so the amount a consumer is spending in a year, has grown 8x in the last 10 years. If the top product category on Nykaa used to be kajal, today it's sunscreen. So the premiumization trend is everywhere. And I think those are some metrics. I think in terms of tier 2, tier 3, we are strong believers that there is one consumption class which is actually the same across tier 1, tier 2, I won't go to tier 3, but tier 1 and tier 2, that pocket of consumption 100% exists in tier 2 as well. So we don't actually see very different consumption patterns across our tier 1 and tier 2 customers. Of course, there is a difference between the customers, but the people who are shopping on our platforms actually are very similar in behavior across those city profiles.
Yeah, Adwaita, firstly, I mean, globally, Sephora, super dominant player, kind of the gold standard in beauty, but Nykaa is that for India. So when you guys started and even over the last decade, kind of how did that play out? Like, why is India different compared to a US or a France or even a Middle East, for instance, that allowed Nykaa to do it? You guys probably have the best insights into trends and what's happening. Would love to hear more about that.
So I think actually it's one of those examples where like India just wasn't a focus market for Sephora. So therefore we had like a very clear entry. For many years, we were the first movers in beauty. And I think that has also been one of the reasons why we've been able to create like a very strong moat and leadership position. The other thing I will say is like Sephora is a very premium store and destination, and the brands they list are very premium. And the point I made to Sakshi earlier, like we're big believers that in India you have to play across a very wide price point. So even if Sephora had their act together, I think they would have been a little bit too premium for the market, and Nykaa's success has come from a very wide assortment. So I think sometimes it's like, new players who have that flexibility to adapt to a market. I think in terms of trends I'm seeing, obviously we've seen skincare explode. Like 5 years ago, from being very makeup driven to now skincare is a massive category. Definitely seeing fragrance and hair care pick up in a really big way. I think there's so many sort of micro trends. We can talk offline about like certain ingredients, fragrance, layering. So there are a lot of like sort of micro trends, but I would say more big picture, you're seeing an emergence of non-makeup categories, and you're seeing a premiumization, and you're seeing a willingness of people to try multiple brands. There's less like attachment to just international brands. People are really willing to try homegrown, new, local, domestic brands. So I think there's definitely a democratization, and more brands are being able to emerge.
I have 2 questions for you. In the early days when you thought Nykaa may not work, and you said you journaled that, what kept you going? Was it metrics, your retention rate, customer feedback, your mom's vision?
Yeah.
And the second question, I thought it was really cool that you said you journal. Do you still do it? Why? Are there other practices that sort of keep you grounded in your journey?
The thing is, and I'm sure a lot of you relate, right? Like, even when your business is not doing well, and even when you journal, like, I don't want to do this, you still want to do it because you're just so committed to, like, seeing this through, and you, like, believe that it can happen. So, again, there was no, like, I think there was, like, an inner resolve that, like, we have to make this happen. We will make it happen. I also think, like, our business model is very sensible, right? So there's no reason why it cannot happen. Like, India does need a destination for beauty. We just, like, need to get there. I think if your business model is still a little more of a question mark, I think one may not have like sort of the resolve to keep at it, and you may question whether you should get out. I would say like inherently believed in the business, didn't want to give up. I definitely think my mom is a huge inspiration to me. I think also because she's worked so much more and she's so much older, this understanding that things take time. Whenever I would get worked up, she'd be like, listen, we got to build this for decades. If you're going to get burnt out today, then how are you going to manage? So I think a lot of her wisdom of being long-term, I would constantly hear her telling me, like, it's a marathon, it's a marathon. Like, I had a baby earlier this year, and she was the person who told me, like, listen, like, you're going to work your entire life. You, like, need to slow down. So I think having a lot of her wisdom on, like, not burning out has been, like, really, really powerful for me. And she just has this belief like our business will work, it just might just take some time. In every new bet we do, like that's just what she believes, and I think it's been very inspirational. I think journaling, I'm a huge fan. I have journaled every single day for the last 13 years. I just write a few sentences every day, but it's been epic because like at the IPO listing, I read out journal entries. And it's just amazing to watch how your business transforms, what you're writing about in the first year about the warehouse couldn't process X number of orders, or like, I really like this person I interviewed, and just like being able to see and reflect on the growth is great in retrospect. So I think if anything, it's just an enjoyable thing to read now. And now I just do it because I want this like record of everything that happened. But more day to day, I do it because I feel that entrepreneurship is so challenging that I always felt I was able to process my emotions and feelings better when I wrote. and I always brought like a lot more clarity. And I think for a lot of us as young leaders, like you have to bring your best self to work. And if you're like dealing with your own, nonsense in your head, then how are you bringing your best self? So if you can work on yourself, like I journal before I go to work. Like I'm nervous that today I may not, I may not deal with this meeting in the right way. Like, so I journal a lot about how to like bring my best self into the office. Like I commit today to bring myself in XYZ ways, or I'm really upset with how I interacted with this person yesterday. So yeah, it's a little, it's like my way of growing and working on myself. Like a lot of people don't do it. A lot of people don't relate to it. Yeah, I mean, I take like leadership and leading my teams like super seriously. Like I think like they have inherited me as a boss and I want to be a really, really good one. And therefore, I think like you have to really work on yourself to be able to do that.
Something you said about culture is great when business is great. I felt that was like a hot take. That was the most honest thing that I heard, because a lot of times you talk about how good people, good teams early on build a great business. But in reality, we also see the opposite, where if things are not going well, it's much harder to motivate your team and people and whatnot. In your early days, especially in those downs, what were some of the things that kept you going and kept the early founding team going? Like, what were things that worked out, especially in your like lowest times?
Look, I think it's really hard to keep like a full team motivated if things are not going well. And a lot about like how they feel about how the company is doing is a little bit out of your hands. But I do feel that as like the founders and the people leading the company, you bringing a very like, committed, positive, cheerful self every day to the office. And I think like positivity, optimism has to come from the top, no matter like how bad things are, is the only thing you can do in that moment when like things are not going well and the culture doesn't seem great and people are not happy. So again, like hard to answer that question on like what can you do, except sometimes it is the elephant in the room that people are not happy, but you kind of have to keep coming and showing up in a sort of positive way. Again, like how did we get through it? I think having each other was like a big thing. Having like an inherent belief that this will work out was a great thing. Yeah, just like this like crazy resilience, like you just want to do it.
You journal about how a lot of this sucks and you still want to keep doing it. That's very relatable too. And I always think about, how do I bring that back to the team? Like, what are some of the frameworks to use to bring the same thinking attitude, because it's not quite written down anywhere, it's more inherent. So anyway, just wanted to think.
Yeah. How do you inspire your team? Okay. Couple of things, like I said, I think optimism and positivity has to come from the top. And so even if you're not feeling it, like I said, you need to do what it takes to get back into like a positive zone. So even though I would like journal it, I feel like I never allowed myself to be like in a very negative zone for like a long period of time, because I think everyone feeds off your guys' energy. So I think like constantly snapping back to positivity. Other things that would inspire in early days, like lots of town halls, lots of like painting the vision, where are we going to be in 5 years? Lots of discussion about like what do we want our values to be, like, how do we want to shape the culture, things like that. Again, like it is hard in the early days when things are not going well to get the engagement and such that you need, but I think you just have to keep chipping away at it. So I think it's the same things we do today, you'd have to do then as well.
I think one last question. Go for it.
Hi, Adwaita. I just wanted to know, like, since you and your mom, you guys were from non-tech background, and Nykaa is a tech product. So how did you guys started, and what kind of challenges you faced in the early, maybe 6 months, especially in the tech side?
Yeah, I think, we didn't even have a CTO in the early days. So we worked with an outsourced company to build the platform. And obviously, like, we are a full-blown tech platform, right? Like, I don't think it's something you can outsource. So it wasn't the right decision. And I think 2 years later, we had to rebuild the whole thing internally after bringing in a CTO. So yeah, we made a lot of decisions like outsourcing, the actual platform build. We like picked a whole bunch of tools, whether it was our ERP or our CRM system, which were all wrong decisions. We linked them up all wrong. We were not able to scale with that first round of technology at all. I think things changed when we actually hired a good CTO. And I think we went through 5 CTOs in 3 or 4 years because again, no one wanted to work with like these non-techies. But eventually when we found the right CTO who stuck, and he stuck with us for 6, 7 years through the IPO, he built a phenomenal team. They redid the entire tech stack. They built everything from scratch. And now today, Nykaa has one of the best technology teams based out of Gurgaon, built a lot on the back of his network and what he laid, and he hired then a very good CTO replacement. So I would say since, again, 2017, we've had stability of like 2 very good CTOs who've handed over to each other, who've built very strong teams. And I think for us as non-technical founders, being able to like motivate and retain your CTO is like the advice and the challenge. And of course, like I think you need to be able to talk and engage on technology and product. And I don't think you need to be from a tech background to be able to do that. I think you just need to like work hard, talk, dig deep, and you can get there.
But how did you convince the CTO to join you?
You know, like I said, I think like by 2017, we had raised money, we could pay better salaries, the business had started growing. So then the CTO wanted to join. It's kind of all like this vicious loop. Like when things are not going well, good people sometimes don't want to join you. Then when things start doing a little bit better, then you get like one breakthrough, one good brand comes, one good CTO comes, things start looking better. Then the business is looking better, then one more good CBO joins, and one more good category head joins, and things look better. So it's a bit of a virtuous cycle upward. And yeah, it's just like you keep chipping away and things just keep getting better, and as it gets better, it attracts better. And now, like when it's doing so well and we're like profitable and we have good cash reserves, we feel like we can enter so many businesses, so many markets with a lot of positivity. And so, yes, I think the truth of the matter is like a good business attracts good culture, a good business attracts more good business, money begets more money. So you just somehow have to get into that like very positive spiral.
Awesome. Thank you so, so much.
Thank
we are big
you.
fans of Nykaa.
Thank you so
and,
much. Yeah.
You know, all the very best.
Thank you. It's
And
been great to be here.
You know, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks.